Hi, my name is Bridget Richardson. I'm the Assistant Director of Ecumenical and Pastoral Initiatives at the Nesty Center for Faith and Culture at University of St. Thomas in Houston. And I'm here with Chrisanne Valancourt Murphy, the Executive Director of the Catholic Mobilizing Network. And she's in DC right now. So thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, Bridget. Thank you.
And so you guys just released a statement of solidarity. So will you talk to us about what that statement is and maybe even infuse a little bit about the Catholic Mobilizing Network and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, today's an extraordinary day. Catholic Mobilizing Network came together with 13 other national Catholic organizations or entities to release the Statement of Solidarity, a Catholic response to COVID behind bars. And really, the reason for coming together was because we've been watching how devastating COVID is to those who are incarcerated, those who are living and working in prison, in jails, detention centers, and reentry centers. It's far, what the virus is doing in those places is far outpacing the devastating impacts, even that we're seeing kind of outside. So Catholic Mobilizing Network for 10 years has been working on ending the death penalty and promoting restorative justice. And while we're wholly committed to working on those issues, that's kind of our niche, we couldn't stand by while people are essentially getting a de facto death sentence by experiencing COVID from behind bars. So Catholic Mobilizing Network came together with the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition, Catholic Health Association, 5 committees from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Jesuit Conference, and several other prison ministry organizations, including the Order of Malta, their prison ministry entity, to write this statement saying that we are standing in solidarity with people who are incarcerated, and we urge political leaders to not forget them at this time.
And it's just incredible the amount of people that you have who were able to connect on this statement of solidarity. What does that look like to bring all of those people together to say, okay, let's put this together, let's release it, let's make sure that, our brothers and sisters behind bars know that we're with them?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things that have been happening that I think just really motivated people to do something. We see that coronavirus is impacting people behind bars in pretty severe ways. And so we have a host of Catholic, chaplains and all these volunteers who do Catholic prison ministry to some degree who can't get into prisons right now. They can't do anointing of the sick. They can't share the sacraments. And so there's no spiritual programming going on in prison right now. So there's this real desire to kind of do the work in the ministry that Catholics do around the country. And then you look at, the close quarters and the limited medical facilities, and just, this, you can't even get hand sanitizer or limited soap, or, how do you deal with that in such an intensely close situation? So, our partners like Catholic Health Association, that's working on health and so deeply engaged around COVID, of course, wanted to do something about what was happening in prison and detention centers, but they're also looking at what's going on with health all over the country. So when our organization and others came together to say, let's look at this more deeply, folks were like, yes, we're all very busy, but how could we not? How can we not step forward? So it's been a bit of a, in some ways, of course we would do it, but we just had to make sure that we weren't forgetting people who are most vulnerable at this time.
Yeah, and with the statement of solidarity, I know at the end of the statement, you talk about creativity and how to do this. So that statement is released. What's the next steps in using creativity to figure out how we tackle this thing?
Right. Well, I think there's ways that at the national level, at the state level, and at local level, there's all sorts of, corrections and officials, political leaders that are having to contend with what's happening with the jails and the prisons and the detention centers in their area. And so we're just calling upon all leaders at all these levels to make sure that they're actually looking at the health and safety, the well-being. They're thinking about perhaps, using tablets or other video calling or voice calling, free calls, not further, over incarcerating in their area, looking at diversionary programs, doing what they can right now. When people are suffering inside and they're really just living out a technical parole violation or a nonviolent crime, it begs all sorts of questions as to why so many people are incarcerated, since we have more people incarcerated in the US than anywhere else in the globe. So I think the creativity is a church question about how we can minister when we can't physically be present, but also how can we as a community come together and look for alternative means to incarceration.
Yeah, and even in some of your work in eliminating the death penalty, a lot of that really does. I mean, we talked on the call beforehand. I found out about Catholic Mobilizing Network when I worked at a church. So how do you see different faith groups and Catholic churches trying to educate people about, here's what you can do? Let's get together for a think tank to think creatively about how we can do this.
Well, the death penalty is one of those issues related to the criminal legal system or criminal justice reform that we really can change. It's really within our grasp. And I think Catholics and other religious traditions have led the way in this, continuing to put before us the moral argument about taking a human life. And really, how can we do that when we say we ultimately want to honor, the dignity of all human life? So Catholics certainly have a, solid ground here, but other religious traditions do too. We try to work with whoever will work on abolition with us, be it Catholics or be it any other people of goodwill. We use every opportunity we can to just share the message about really what's happening, who's ending up on death row, how many people are there, their struggles with innocence, their struggles with even victim family members where there's been a grave harm, who say, please don't take another life in my name. So you even have, in some cases, victim family members coming forward to save the life of the person that harmed their loved one. So that's what we need to do, I think, as a religious community, come together and lift up these stories and these voices, these realities, separate myths from facts, and then state by state, county by county, go towards seeking abolition. We're about halfway there. And if you count the states that haven't executed anyone, even though death penalty or capital punishment is still on the books, we've got more than 3/4 of the nation, kind of not practicing the death penalty any longer, which is exciting. This is very winnable to end the death penalty in the United States.
Yeah, and we had mentioned, we're here in Houston, Texas. So what does Texas look like, during the pandemic right now, but also in terms of the death penalty?
Well, Texas is one of those states that unfortunately is a main perpetrator of the death penalty. It's getting better in some ways. The death row in Texas is smaller than it's been since the 80s, which is excellent. Just have to lift up this moment of COVID, as strange as it is. Texas has been one of those states that has halted executions since March. So the last person to be executed in Texas was Abel Ochoa, and that was on February 6th. But there's been 6 delayed executions since the pandemic's beginning. So here we have like this reprieve. And, what I worry about as an abolitionist is that what's going to happen when, the COVID, there's this reintegration. It could stand to reason that there'd be an uptick in death sentences or executions again. So we're being quite vigilant. The other thing I want to say about Texas is that it has the 3rd highest death row in the country. So it follows California, which currently has a moratorium on executions that has about 725 people on death row, followed by Florida and then Texas. So even though it's decreased in number, it's still one of the highest in the country. So if you're from Texas, you care about the death penalty, there's all sorts of ways that you can become involved in calling for clemency for those who are facing imminent execution, or you can just do the education and the prayer and the advocacy that's needed to create this groundswell for people to understand the realities behind the death penalty.
And in your work, how long have you been with Catholic Mobilizing Network?
It's going about 3 years now. I first came on as a consultant and then moved into the position of executive director following a Texanian or a Texan who had started the organization. Her name was Karen Clifton, and she's now on our board. She lived in Houston for many years. And then Archbishop Fiorenza was also key to beginning the organization, another Houstonian.
And how has that arc been for you personally to really see this for what it is? You know, you have a behind the scenes look at the numbers and what it really is, and then this human life issue. What has that been for you to experience that in a very practical way in your work?
You know, I came to working at Catholic Mobilizing after many years of working on faith-based advocacy, but I'd never worked on a life issue. I'd never worked on the death penalty. I'd worked on other things like, you know, human rights or hunger. But I saw Dead Men Walking, you know, in the 90s as a movie when Sister Helen, when she released that film, Susan Sarandon and others, Sean Penn. And that was a really formative time for me. You know, I was in my 20s and it was, it never left me. And so when the opportunity came to work on this issue and, you know, being a lifelong Catholic and committed to Catholic social teaching, I thought this is really a time where I can integrate the fullness of my Catholic tradition in my advocacy work. And what I love about Catholic Mobilizing is that we also work on restorative justice. So we're not just against something, we're for creating a way that honors all human life. And so that means looking at the dignity of the perpetrator and the victim, and then seeking ways to repair and heal and address harm and seek accountability and make amends and teach other people how to do that. So as a lifelong advocacy kind of professional, now I see this as a way to really integrate the fullness of my Catholic tradition and really how lifelong change can happen through transformation.
Well, Chrisanne, thank you so much for joining me today. That was a wonderful expression of how our Catholic social teaching really does inform our lives, inform how we interact with others, and the relationship we should have when we think about what it means to be pro-life and to advocate for human life.
Indeed, indeed. Well, I would love, Bridget, I don't know if you're going to share this with folks, but I would love for anybody listening and interested in this work to visit CatholicMobilizing.org. And certainly on our website, it's the first thing you'll see, the Statement of Solidarity. It's open for signers, organizational and individuals. So we just want to continue the education and you know, doing advocacy in ways that really make change for good.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm gonna link everything in our description, and I'll make sure people have that link to go ahead and sign their name and also read the statement. You know, the thing that popped out the most to me in the statement is that it was described the way that people are also, you know, you're isolated when you're in prison, but the other ways that they're further being isolated and not being able to connect, right?
And the anxiety and the fear that brings. Yeah, it's quite stunning. So I think this is a moment, you know, in this time of COVID and in social distancing, we're having this like a little bit of a taste of what isolation is. It's nothing to compare to being incarcerated, but I think that there might be an openness just because we've all experienced something new with this time. Hopefully there's an openness of heart and an interest to learn more about these issues.
Well, we'll definitely link everything. And thank you so much for your time. I know that you have probably, like you said, it's a big day for y'all. So thank you so much, Chrisanne, for joining me today.
It's good to see you. Thanks so much for your work, Bridget. Take care.
You too.